I'm Teisha with Shalom TV's news update for Friday, August the 23rd, 2013. The Israeli Air Force struck a terrorist target 7 kilometers south of Beirut early this morning. The airstrike was carried out in response to the 4 rockets fired yesterday into northern Israel from Lebanon. The IDF called the rocket attack on Israel yesterday a blatant breach on Israeli sovereignty that jeopardized Israeli civilian life, and said Israel will not tolerate terrorist aggression originating from Lebanese territory. Yesterday, a Sunni group called Abdallah al-Azam Brigades claimed responsibility for the rocket attack, though Israel said it ultimately holds the Lebanese government responsible for the rockets. Defense Minister Moshe Ya'alon held a consultation with IDF Chief of Staff Benny Gantz today and said the state of Israel sees the Lebanese government as responsible to what happens in its territory and will not allow any firing or provocation at it. We will not allow anyone to disrupt the lives of our civilians. Yesterday, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu reacted to the rocket attacks from Lebanon, saying how Israel would respond. "We are deploying a wide range of means," he said in a statement, "both defensive and preventative. We are acting responsibly. Anyone who attacks us or tries to attack us should know that we will get him." The United States condemned the attack and called for restraint from both Israel and Lebanon. State Department Deputy Spokesman Dina Badawi told the Jerusalem Post that the attack was a provocative act that undermines the stability of Lebanon and the security of Israel. And Prime Minister Netanyahu announced yesterday that he will address the annual United Nations General Assembly meeting at the end of next month to deliver a speech that is expected to focus once again on Iran. The Prime Minister's office said the speech is scheduled for September the 30th. This is the 3rd year in a row that Netanyahu will address the UN. You may remember last year, the Prime Minister used the opportunity to illustrate the growing threat of Iran's nuclear development, as he famously drew a thick red line on a drawing of a bomb before the General Assembly. Iran's President Hassan Rouhani is also expected to address the General Assembly, and Netanyahu yesterday reacted to reports of the massacre on Wednesday in Syria of hundreds of civilians, allegedly by the use of chemical weapons. Netanyahu said Iran is using Syria as a testing ground and carefully watching how the world responds to Damascus's use of chemical weapons against its own people. He said the reported use of chemical weapons against innocent civilians is terribly disturbing. If verified, it will be a horrible addition to the roster of tragic crimes committed by the Syrian regime against the people of Syria. The Prime Minister said the events in Syria further prove that the world's most dangerous regimes must not be allowed to gain possession of the world's most dangerous arms. The Jerusalem Post reports that Palestinian Authority President Mahmoud Abbas told a group of visiting Knesset members from the left-wing Meretz Party that he was not optimistic about peace talks, but hoped they were not a waste of time. Abbas told the Israeli Knesset members in Ramallah yesterday that there hasn't been any real progress made in the talks during the first 4 meetings held between Israeli and Palestinian negotiators. Abbas also said the meetings between the sides should be even more frequent, every day even, and that he wanted to meet directly with Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu. Abbas also said that the release of Palestinian security prisoners by Israel was unrelated to the launching of peace talks, and he reiterated his stance of a 2-state solution with the establishment of an independent Palestinian state on the 1967 borders with Jerusalem as its capital. Haaretz reports that Abbas said that the Palestinians would accept changes to the 67 borders as part of land swap agreements, and said, "Let's lay down a map and start marking the borders." Haaretz also quoted Abbas as saying, "People say that after signing a peace agreement, we will still demand Haifa, Akkar, and Safat. That is not true," he said. "Signing the agreement will signal the end of the conflict." Abbas's comments come amidst the previous urging of U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry to both the Palestinians and Israelis to not divulge information about the content of the peace talks to the media. The Anti-Defamation League issued an open letter to Roger Waters yesterday, strongly criticizing his recent call for a cultural boycott of Israel. As we reported to you, the Pink Floyd frontman sent an open letter urging his fellow musicians to join him in refusing to perform in Israel, calling it an apartheid state. The ADL called Waters' letter outrageous, saying it is colored by offensive and dangerous undercurrents of anti-Jewish sentiment. ADL National Director Abe Foxman wrote that in the past, when Waters used Jewish imagery in his concerts and Waters rejected accusations of anti-Semitism, that the ADL took him at his word, defending his use of artistic expression. But that in recent months, Foxman writes, attacks against Israel and calls for a boycott have caused the ADL to re-examine that view, and specifically examine Waters' BDS call, or boycott, divestment, and sanctions movement support. Foxman writes that Waters' letters chooses to omit many facts. He wrote, "Your writing also makes no mention of Palestinian terrorism, nor does it provide any context to the complex nature of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. Hamas, a terrorist organization which continues to advocate for Israel's destruction, is entirely absent from your letter." Foxman further says you accuse the Israeli government of committing ethnic cleansing by physically evicting non-Jewish families from East Jerusalem to make way for Jewish occupants, yet provide zero evidence for this frivolous claim. You argue that Israel is akin to apartheid South Africa, despite the complete and equal rights enjoyed by Arab citizens of Israel. Most disturbing, Foxman said, is your decision to single out Israel for a boycott while ignoring real human rights abusing countries around the world. Foxman adds that if Waters wanted to truly address the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, he would show support for a two-state solution and urge his fellow musicians to embrace the idea of Israel living in peace and security alongside a Palestinian state. The World Jewish Congress yesterday urged clergy in the Ukraine to stop attending neo-Nazi events. WJC President Ronald Lauder wrote a letter to the head of the Ukrainian Orthodox Church, Patriarch Filaret, referencing a recent ceremony near Lviv, marking the 70th anniversary of the creation of the Galician Division of the Waffen-SS, where Ukrainians fought on the side of Nazi Germany. Lauder wrote, "I was horrified to see photographs of young Ukrainians wearing the dreaded SS uniform with swastikas clearly visible on their helmets as they carried the caskets of members of this Nazi unit, lowered them into their new graves, and fired gun salutes in their honor." Adding, "I was especially troubled by the participation in this ceremony of a priest of the Ukrainian Orthodox Church that appeared to give a religious legitimacy to the rehabilitation of the SS." Lauder asked Filaret to call on fellow clergy in the church to refrain from future similar events that glorify or legitimize a uniform that epitomizes the evil of genocide. Dutch regional daily De Gelderlander reported yesterday that a museum in the country will be restored over the next few years to its previous function as a synagogue. The Natural Science Museum in Nijmegen used to serve the community's 500 Jews from 1913 to 1943, when most of those Jews were killed by the Nazis. The surviving Jewish community couldn't bear the cost of the synagogue, and the building was sold. Jem Vandenberg, who is the head of a nonprofit called Big Synagogue, A Jewish Future, told the Daily that the city's municipality has agreed to finance his plan to restore the building to its original function. The city council was set to vote on the plan later this year. It is thought likely to pass. The restoration is set to be completed by 2015. And finally today, a young Israeli woman is among the top 35 innovators under 35 on a list put together by the MIT Technology Review. 26-year-old Dr. Kira Radinsky completed her PhD this year at the Technion and was selected from among hundreds of candidates for being, quote, an exceptional inventor and for her leading work in the area of programming. Radinsky created a new method of prognostication, which could predict events with an average accuracy of 80% by scanning literature from the past 500 years in an attempt to find correlations between different types of events. Today, Radinsky is involved in an organization that is active against genocide and with a medical organization in order to implement lessons learned from her research. She said she was truly honored to be on the 35 under 35 list, whose past members have included Facebook founder Mark Zuckerberg and Google founders Larry Page and Sergey Brin. Dr. Radinsky said, "I really hope my win will encourage other young people to go into research and that they will choose to do things that will influence all of our lives." And that's Shalom TV's news update for Friday, August the 23rd, 2013. I'm Teisha Bader. Shabbat Shalom.